The hospital called at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon to tell me my father was gone. By 8:30 that same evening, his wife had already changed the locks on the front door. She was waiting in the hallway when I came downstairs with my overnight bag. Her face was calm, like she had been practicing this moment from the second the phone rang. "This is my house now," she said. "Pack your things and leave." I had a duffel bag, a laptop, and a set of keys to a building she had no idea existed. I zipped the bag, walked right past her, and did not say a single word. She had no clue what she had just set in motion. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones always get the last word. If you are new here, subscribe and tap the bell so you do not miss what happens next. Trust me, this is one story you will want to hear all the way through. The Wednesday before everything changed, I drove 40 minutes to my father's house for dinner, just like I did every week. Linda had made pot roast. She always made pot roast on Wednesdays, and she always set 3 places at the table. Mine was never one of them. I stopped mentioning it years ago. I would come in through the side door, take my plate from the cabinet, place it at the corner of the table where the placemat was smaller than the others, and eat whatever Linda had cooked. The routine was so familiar that I could move through it without thinking. My father was sitting in his usual chair when I walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered. His skin had the faded color of old newspaper, and his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his fork. He had been losing weight for months. Linda kept saying he just did not have much of an appetite. But I had seen his medical records through the hospital portal. I knew it was his heart. Cora sat across from him, scrolling through her phone with her chair pushed back and one knee tucked up. She was 24 and still living at home. Linda called that smart. I called it nothing, because it was not my place to say anything. Halfway through dinner, my father set down his fork and looked at me. "Did you get that building file sorted out?" Before I could answer, Linda cut in. "Douglas, not at dinner. We were talking about the remodel." He looked at me. I looked back at him. Then he picked up his fork again. After dinner, I washed the dishes. I always washed the dishes. On the counter beside the sink was a small stack of mail, an electric bill, an insurance statement, and a letter from a law firm addressed to Douglas Irving. The envelope had not been opened. Before I could read the return address, Linda swept the whole stack into a drawer. "Just junk," she said. I dried my hands on the towel and drove home. The onion smell from the cast iron skillet stayed on my coat the entire way back. When I reached the highway, I rolled down the window and let the cold air pull it away. That was the last Wednesday I ever ate in that house. I lost my mother when I was 10. Her name was Helen. She had brown hair, a quiet laugh, and a way of folding laundry that made it seem like her mind was somewhere far away. I remember the laundry more clearly than I remember the service. After she was gone, my father did not know what to do with a 10-year-old girl who cried in the bathtub every night. He was not built for emotional conversations. He was built for spreadsheets, property assessments, and the kind of silence men from small towns carry around like a second coat. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He taught me math. Every Saturday morning, he drove me around in his old truck, the one with cloth seats that somehow smelled like leather even though they were not leather. We would look at houses, not to buy them, just to study them. He would pull up in front of a property with a for sale sign and ask, "What do you think this one is worth?" I would guess. He would correct me. Then he would explain why. Square footage, lot size, comparable sales, interest rates. The way a north-facing kitchen could lose value in a winter market. I did not understand all of it back then, but I understood one thing. He was talking to me. And at that age, that was enough. By the time I was 12, I could read a mortgage statement faster than most adults. I could estimate property tax from a listing photo. I could tell when a house was overpriced just by the way the agent described the neighborhood. Money does not fix everything, my father told me one Saturday as we sat parked in front of a 2-story colonial with a cracked driveway. But it fixes a lot of things people like to pretend have nothing to do with money. That same year, he married Linda. She came into our home with a 2-year-old daughter named Cora and a smile that spread through every room like fresh paint. She rearranged the kitchen. She bought new curtains. She made pot roast on Wednesdays and banana bread on Sundays. She called my father honey, in a voice that sounded like she had practiced it in front of a mirror. I wanted to like her. I really tried. But within 6 months, my bedroom had been painted pink and turned into Cora's playroom. I was moved into the smallest room in the house, the one beside the garage that always smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. My father said, "Linda had a hard time before. Be patient." I was 12, so I was patient. Linda was not the kind of person people instantly recognize as cruel. She did not make loud scenes. She did not slam doors or put on dramatic displays. That would have been easier to explain. Linda was quieter than that. She was organized. Within 2 years of moving into our house, she had rearranged every room until the entire place seemed to revolve around Cora. The family photos on the mantel changed slowly. At first, only a few pictures of Helen were moved to the hallway. Then they were shifted to the upstairs landing. Eventually, they ended up in a box in the attic with the words "Old Frames" written on the side. In their place, Linda put up studio portraits of herself, Douglas, and Cora. One of them had been taken at a department store photo studio. All 3 of them wore matching navy sweaters. I was not in that picture. I had not even been told about the appointment. Linda controlled the money, too. Not in some loud or dramatic way. She simply made herself responsible for every dollar. She kept a spreadsheet on the family computer. Every grocery trip, every gas receipt, every subscription, she tracked all of it. Then, on the first day of every month, she would sit down with my father and go over it. She called it our family budget review. It was the only family meeting I was never asked to join. When I asked my father about it, he told me Linda had gone through a difficult financial situation in her first marriage. Her ex-husband had left her with almost nothing. No savings, no car, no credit history. The fear of ever feeling powerless again made her want to track every cent that came into the house. I understood the reason. For a while, I even felt sorry for her. But sympathy can only stretch so far when someone uses their past as permission to keep pushing you further and further away from your own family. By the time I was 14, I had the smallest room in the house, and my name was the one Linda always seemed to forget. Every December, she sent out Christmas cards. On the front, they said, "The Irving family." On the back, there was a photo of the 3 of them. When our neighbor, Mr. Hamblin, asked why I was not in the picture, Linda laughed like it was nothing. "Oh, Paige is so busy with school," she said. "She never has time for photos." I was standing right there. I was not busy. I had been home all afternoon. My father heard the whole thing. He looked at me from across the kitchen counter, and for 1 second, I thought he was finally going to speak up. He opened his mouth, then he closed it. He picked up his coffee and walked out to the garage. That was the year I stopped waiting for someone else to make things right. The summer I turned 16, my father drove me to his office on a Saturday morning. He closed the door behind us, sat me down across from his desk, and opened a manila folder with my name written on it. "I started this for you 2 years ago," he said. Inside was a statement. $5,000 in an index fund, he explained. "It is in your name." I looked down at the paper. The balance had grown to $6,200. I did not fully understand compound interest yet. Not really. but I understood the meaning behind what he had done. He was building something for me that Linda could not touch. "Do not mention this to Linda," he said. Before I could answer, he raised one hand. "Not because it is some big secret," he added, "because she will worry. She worries about anything she cannot put into one of her spreadsheets." Then he taught me how to read the quarterly reports. He showed me how to compare the fund's performance to the index. He explained what numbers mattered and which ones were just noise. Then he handed me a small pocket calculator. It was cheap, with a cracked plastic case and buttons that sometimes stuck. "Keep this," he said. "Do your own math, always." So I kept it. I still have it. Over the next 2 years, my father added to the fund whenever he could. Never huge amounts, a few $100s here, 1,000 there. He also began telling me about a building he partly owned downtown. It was a commercial property, 6 floors, mostly office space. He had bought into it years earlier, back when the neighborhood was overlooked and the price was low. "Someday, this will be yours," he told me. He said it the way another father might say, "Someday, this truck will be yours." I nodded. I did not ask too many questions. By then, I had learned that when my father gave me something, the smartest thing I could do was stay quiet and hold on to it. The desk lamp hummed softly. The old calculator clicked under my thumb. Outside the office window, I could hear a lawnmower running 2 houses down. Beneath it was the low, steady static of the AM radio my father always kept tuned to the market station. 6 years later, I graduated summa laude in forensic accounting. The fund my father had started with $5,000 had grown to $62,000, and the building downtown, the one he had once said would be mine someday, was already in my name. He had transferred the first shares to me on my 18th birthday. I did not tell anyone. There was nothing to tell. It was just math. I left for college at 18 and never really came back. Not in some dramatic way. There were no slammed doors, no tearful speeches, no arguments in the driveway. I simply packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into the used sedan my father had helped me buy, and drove east to a university 4 hours away. Linda waved from the kitchen window. Cora, who was 8 at the time, did not even look up from the television. I rented a small studio apartment near campus. It had one window facing a parking lot, a radiator that clanged through the night, and a coffee maker I found at a thrift store for $7. The coffee was awful. I drank it every morning anyway, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt like I could breathe. My father and I spoke every Sunday. He called at 9 o'clock in the morning before Linda woke up. We would spend 20 minutes going over the fund, the building shares, and the market. He never asked much about my classes. I never asked much about Linda. That was how we talked, numbers instead of feelings, returns instead of apologies. And somehow, it worked. Every time I came back to visit, something in the house had changed. The first year, my old bedroom had become a yoga room. There was a roll-out mat on the floor, incense on the windowsill, and a speaker mounted on the wall playing ocean sounds. The second year, the garage had been turned into a craft room for Cora. By the third year, even the hallway photos had been replaced. There was not a single picture of me visible on the first floor of the house where I had grown up. Linda never asked what I did for a living. She never asked how much I made. She assumed I was just getting by. I could see it in the way she looked at my coat, my car, my shoes. The possibility that I might be doing well never crossed her mind. In Linda's version of the world, I had always been the one who did not matter. Meanwhile, my father kept transferring shares of the downtown building into my name. By the time I was 28, I owned it completely. The property had grown in value in a way even he had not expected. The neighborhood had changed. The tenants were paying market-rate leases. The building was worth more than every house on our street combined. Linda turned my old bedroom into a yoga room the same month I signed my first major lease. I did not mention it, neither did she. The spring I turned 32, my father was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The doctors said it could be managed. They said he needed medication, monitoring, and rest. They did not say he needed Linda's permission to see his daughter. But that was what happened. The first time I called to arrange a visit, Linda answered the house phone. "He is resting," she said. "The doctor said no stress." The second time, she told me, "Douglas does not want visitors right now. I am handling everything." The third time, I drove to the house without calling first. Linda met me at the door. "Paige, I know you are worried," she said, her voice soft and careful. "But your father needs calm. You showing up without notice is not calm." Then she closed the door. I stood on the porch for 2 minutes before walking back to my car. That night, I called my Aunt Maggie. Maggie was my father's younger sister. She was 70 years old, sharp as a tax audit, and the only person in the family who had never been fooled by Linda's pot roast. Maggie had always seen through her. She just never said it out loud, because Douglas had never asked her to. "Linda has been telling the family you are too busy with work to visit," Maggie said. I sat up straighter. "She told the Hamiltons at church that you have not called in weeks." "I have called 14 times in the last month," I said. "I know you have," Maggie replied. "And I also know she had Douglas sign a financial power of attorney last Tuesday. She is on his bank accounts now." I sat in my apartment with the phone in my hand and felt the world tilt beneath me. Not because of the money. My assets were separate. Untouchable. It was because I recognized the pattern. Linda was not just managing Douglas's care. Linda was managing access. She was deciding who could see him, what they were told, and what they were allowed to believe. She was building a wall around my father, and he was too weak to notice it. 3 weeks later, he had another serious medical episode. Linda called everyone: Maggie, the cousins, the neighbors, the church group. She arranged rides, meal deliveries, and hospital visits. She organized everything. Except me. I found out from a hospital nurse who recognized my last name in the system and called the emergency contact number on file. My cell phone. The number my father had listed years earlier, before Linda had the chance to change it. He was gone on a Wednesday. Of course it was a Wednesday. The hospital called me at 4:21 in the afternoon. A nurse named Deborah spoke in a calm, careful voice and told me Douglas Irving had suffered another heart episode, and this time they could not bring him back. She said it gently, with the kind of steady tone that told me she had made calls like this before. She asked if I needed a moment. I said no. I said thank you. I said I will be there tonight. Then I drove 3 hours through the dark. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. All I could think about was the last time I had seen my father, 6 weeks earlier, through the kitchen window while Linda walked me back to my car. He had been sitting at the table, looking out at me. Then he raised one hand. Not quite a wave, just a small lift of his palm. He held it there until I backed out of the driveway. I had not been allowed inside that day. When I reached the house, there were already cars in the driveway. Neighbors, a few cousins, people who had been called before me. The porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see Linda standing in the kitchen, arranging white chrysanthemums in a glass vase. She wore a black blouse, and her hair was pinned neatly in place. She looked like a woman who had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. I went in through the side door, my old way in. Upstairs, the yoga room, the room that used to be mine, still had the mat rolled out on the floor. The incense burner sat on the windowsill. The little speaker was still mounted to the wall. I placed my duffel bag on the mat and sat down. Linda appeared in the doorway less than 5 minutes later. She stood with both hands on the doorframe, blocking the light from the hall. "You are not sleeping here," she said. Then she added, "This is my house now. Your father would have wanted it that way." I looked at the mat, the incense, the speaker on the wall. None of it had felt like mine for a very long time. "Okay," I said. I picked up my bag, walked downstairs, and passed Cora on the staircase. She stood 3 steps above me, holding her phone against her chest. She did not say a word. She just looked at me the way people look at someone leaving a place they both know they will never return to. I drove to a motel 4 miles down the highway. Then I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going inside. The key to the downtown building was in my coat pocket. I could feel its sharp edge through the lining. I could have told Linda right there in that hallway. I could have told her I owned a building worth more than every house on that street combined. But some truths are more powerful when they arrive at the right time. The service was held at a small church on Elm Street, the one with the stained glass window of a shepherd that had been cracked since 1987 and somehow never repaired. My father had gone there every Easter and every Christmas. Linda had made sure the program listed her as his beloved wife on the second line beneath his name. I arrived early. Linda and Cora were already seated in the front row, perfectly centered, their shoulders touching. Linda wore a black dress and pearl earrings. Cora wore a new black skirt I had never seen before. They looked coordinated, like they had planned the image the night before. They probably had. There were 3 chairs in the family row. 3. So I sat in the 3rd row, between a woman I did not recognize and an empty space. The seat creaked beneath me. The lilies near the altar smelled like a hospital waiting room. Maggie arrived 5 minutes before the service began. Maggie walked straight past the front row, past Linda's pearl earrings, past Cora's new black skirt. Then she sat down beside me, took my hand, and rested it on her knee without saying a word. After a moment, she leaned closer and whispered, "Douglas prepared everything. Trust me." I nodded. I did not ask what she meant. I could feel something coming. Not clearly, not yet, but in the same way you can feel the weather shift before the sky changes color. The pastor spoke. 2 neighbors gave short memories of my father. One of them called him a quiet man who showed love through actions instead of words. I almost smiled at that. After the service, in the church parking lot, Mr. Embry came up to me. He was holding a paper cup of coffee from the fellowship hall, and he looked genuinely confused. "Paige," he said, "why weren't you sitting with the family?" "There were only 3 chairs," I said. He blinked. Then he looked over at Linda, who was accepting condolences near the waiting car with one hand pressed to her collarbone. He looked back at me, and he said nothing else. Before everyone left, Linda made an announcement. She stood on the church steps in her black dress, with Cora holding her arm, and spoke to the group like she had rehearsed every word. "Douglas was very clear," she said. "The house is our family home. Cora and I will be staying there, just as he always intended." She did not look at me when she said it. She did not need to. What she did not mention was the meeting with the estate attorney scheduled for the following Thursday. Linda started taking inventory the morning after the service. She began with the house. She called a real estate appraiser named Garfield, a man with square glasses and a clipboard. He walked through every room, measured the kitchen, checked the attic, and tapped the basement walls with his knuckles. Then he told Linda the house was worth about $380,000. Linda wrote the number on the back of an envelope. Then she underlined it twice. Next, she went to the bank. She presented the official paperwork and asked for a summary of all accounts connected to Douglas Irving. The teller pulled up the joint savings account. $140,000. Linda frowned. Douglas had worked for 30 years and earned a good salary. Where was the rest? She asked the teller to check again. Individual accounts, investment accounts, anything under the name Douglas Irving. The teller typed, scrolled, then shook her head. That is the only account we have on file for this name at this branch. Linda drove home and sat at the kitchen table. Cora came in and poured herself a glass of orange juice. Did you find everything? Cora asked. $380,000 for the house, Linda said. $140,000 in savings. That's it? Cora set the glass down. That can't be right. Linda did not answer. Then Cora tilted her head. Didn't you say he had some building or something downtown? Linda looked up. A building? He used to ask Paige about some building file every Wednesday, Cora said. You always change the subject. Linda's face went still. The kitchen was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the slow drip of the faucet she had been meaning to fix for a year. What building? Linda asked. Cora shrugged. I don't know. I just remember hearing him mention it. Linda picked up her phone and called the estate attorney's office. She demanded an earlier meeting. The receptionist told her Thursday was still the soonest available appointment. Linda said she would take it. Then she hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time. The coffee in her mug went cold. The appraiser's number was still written on the back of the envelope. $380,000, underlined twice. She had expected more, much more, and for the first time since my father was gone, I was not the person in the family feeling afraid. I stayed at the Pinewood Motor Lodge for 5 nights. The room was $39 a night. The mattress dipped in the middle, and the shower curtain had a stain shaped almost exactly like the state of Ohio. It was fine. I had slept in worse places during college. Every morning, I woke before 6 and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Outside my window, the neon sign blinked through the curtains. Vacancy. Always vacancy. Its pink glow shifted across the room every time a truck passed on the highway. In those moments, I did not think about money. I thought about my father, the Saturday drives, the old calculator, the way he had raised his hand through the kitchen window the last time I saw him. Not really waving goodbye, just holding still. Grief does not care how much money you have. It shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning, in a motel room that smells like bleach, sits quietly at the edge of the bed, and waits for you to notice it. On the 3rd morning, I called my attorney, Mitchell Hale. He was 46, an estate and asset protection lawyer who spoke in full paragraphs and wore ties that were always slightly crooked. I had hired him 2 years earlier, when I first realized Linda was positioning herself around my father's finances. I need you to confirm everything is current, I said. Mitchell pulled the files. Then he read the list back to me. The 6-story commercial building downtown is 100% in your name, transferred in stages between 2008 and 2020. He continued. The index fund is now valued at $4.2 million. The secondary real estate portfolio is spread across 8 properties in 3 states and totals $5.8 million. Cash reserves and brokerage accounts make up the rest. He paused. Total value under your name as of Douglas's passing is approximately $28 million. I closed my eyes. None of it is part of his estate, Mitchell said. None of it goes through probate. None of it belongs to Linda. I know, I said. I just needed to hear you say it. Are you expecting her to challenge it? Linda? I asked. Yes. She will try. She will not win. I know that too. I ended the call and sat on the edge of the motel bed. Outside, a semi-truck downshifted on the highway, and the pink neon sign flickered once before steadying again. My father did not just leave me money. He left me the roots. I grew the rest myself. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed the portfolio the same way I did every quarter. Not because I needed to, because it was the only ritual I had left that still felt like a conversation with my father. The commercial building was the anchor, 6 floors, 32 tenants, fully occupied for the 3rd year in a row. My father had bought his first shares back when the neighborhood was still zoned industrial, and the closest place to eat was a taco stand operating out of an old converted school bus. He used to drive me past that block on Saturdays and say, "Someday, this place will be worth something." He was right. The building alone was valued at approximately $18 million. That number would have seemed impossible when he first bought in, but 25 years of appreciation, neighborhood redevelopment, and rising commercial lease rates had done what numbers always do when you give them enough time. They grew. The index fund, the one he had started with $5,000 when I was 16, had grown to $4.2 million. Most of that came from compound returns, reinvested dividends, and my own steady contributions from my salary over the years. My father planted the first seed. I watered it every month, exactly the way he taught me. Then there were the secondary holdings. Equity in 8 smaller commercial properties across 3 states, purchased through fund returns and reinvested rental income. $5.8 million. Nothing flashy, nothing risky. Just patient, boring, long-term accumulation. The kind of wealth that does not announce itself through someone's shoes, handbag, or car. $28 million under the name Paige Irving, and not $1 of it was part of Douglas Irving's estate. Linda was focused on a house worth $380,000. She was focused on savings of $140,000. She was changing locks, arranging white flowers, and practicing lines about her house, while the person she had sent away held a portfolio worth more than 50 times the property she was so desperate to claim. I closed the laptop. The motel room went dark, except for the faint blue glow from the screen fading across the ceiling. Outside, a car pulled into the parking lot. Its headlights swept across the curtains, then disappeared. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel proud. I just felt tired. I missed my father. And more than anything, I wanted to call him and read him the numbers, the same way I had every quarter for 18 years. But some calls can never be made again. Linda called me on Monday evening, 4 days before the will reading. It was the first time she had dialed my number since the night she told me to pack my bags. "Paige." Her voice was sweet and controlled, the same voice she used when guests were over and she wanted me to clear the dessert plates. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Your father," she said carefully, "did he ever mention a building? Something downtown? Cora said he used to bring it up at dinner." "A building?" I said. "Yes, some kind of commercial property. I have been going through his papers and I cannot find anything about it." "I think everything will be clarified at the reading on Thursday." Silence. Then her voice tightened. "Paige, I was his wife for 22 years. I have a right to know what he owned." "Then the attorney will explain it." "I do not want to wait until Thursday. I want to know now." "I understand." "Are you going to tell me?" "I think Thursday is the right time." She hung up. Then she called back. I did not answer. She called again. And again. 3 calls in 7 minutes. I placed the phone face down on the motel nightstand and listened to it vibrate against the wood. 3 short buzzes each time. Then silence. If you have ever known someone who only reaches out when they need something, you know that voice. It is sweeter than any tone they have ever used with you before. It arrives without an apology. It skips right over the last cruel thing they said. It ignores the part where they sent you away from the house on the night your father was gone. It jumps straight to the part where they need information. Linda did not call to ask how I was holding up. She did not call to apologize for the locks, or the duffel bag, or the 3 chairs at the service. She called because she had found a number that did not make sense, and I was the only variable she had not included in her calculations. I turned off my phone and lay in the dark. The mattress dipped beneath me. The neon sign blinked outside the window, and somewhere in a house 4 miles away, a woman was sitting at a kitchen table, realizing for the first time that the person she had dismissed for 22 years might have been the most important person in the room all along. She just did not know how important yet. Maggie called me on Tuesday morning. She did not say hello. She said, "Linda withdrew $80,000 from the joint savings account yesterday." I sat up in bed. How? She used the financial power of attorney Douglas signed last spring, Maggie said. She walked into the branch with the document and the official paperwork, then requested a cashier's check. The power of attorney is not valid anymore, I said. It ended the moment Douglas passed. I know that. You know that. Apparently, the teller did not. I called Mitchell within the hour. He confirmed it. The transaction had gone through. $80,000 had been withdrawn from a joint account using a document that no longer had legal authority. The withdrawal can be challenged, Mitchell said. A power of attorney ends at death under state law. The bank may have responsibility for honoring it, but more importantly, this tells us something about Linda's state of mind. What does it tell us? She is panicking, he said. She is taking what she can reach because she suspects there is something she cannot reach. I asked him to pull the transaction records. He did. $80,000 out. The funeral arrangements had cost about $8,000. The service, the burial plot, the flowers, all of it. That left $72,000 unaccounted for. Where did the rest go? I asked. I will have the bank trace the cashier's check, Mitchell said. But my guess is that it went into a personal account Linda opened recently. Print everything. Bring it Thursday. Already done. I ended the call and sat at the small motel desk, the one with the laminate top peeling at the corner. Somewhere in Mitchell's office, his printer was probably already running. Transaction statements, power of attorney expiration dates, state law citations. Each page was another brick in a wall Linda did not realize was being built around her. She had taken the money because she was scared. I understood that. Fear can make people do things logic cannot explain. But understanding something does not mean excusing it. And $80,000 withdrawn from an account after someone's passing, using a legal document that no longer applied, was not fear. It was a choice, dressed up in black clothing and pearl earrings. The will reading was 4 days away. Linda had no idea that every dollar she moved was being documented. Every transaction, every timestamp, every signature she had no authority to make. I set my phone on the nightstand and turned it off again. Thursday would arrive soon enough. The law office of Harlan Beckett was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Main Street, above a dentist's office and across from a bakery that smelled like cinnamon rolls every morning at 7 o'clock. The staircase was narrow. The banister was wooden. The carpet on the landing had been replaced so many times that it no longer matched the walls. Harlan's conference room had a long oval table made of dark wood, 8 green leather chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Behind his chair hung a framed law degree from a state university. Beside it was a clock with Roman numerals that ticked louder than any clock should. Linda arrived first. She wore a black blazer, pressed slacks, and the same pearl earrings she had worn at the service. Cora followed behind her in a gray cardigan, clutching a small handbag. They sat at the head of the table as if the seating arrangement had already been decided. Maggie came next. She wore a navy blue dress she had probably owned for 20 years and a pair of flat shoes that made no sound on the carpet. She sat halfway down the table and folded her hands. Two of my father's cousins arrived together, Arthur and Dean, both in their 60s, both wearing ties that were slightly too short. They nodded at Linda, nodded at Maggie, and took seats near the window. I was the last one to walk in. Mitchell was beside me, carrying a leather briefcase with brass clasps. He wore a gray suit and, as always, a tie that sat just a little crooked. Linda's eyes locked onto him immediately. "Who is this?" she asked. "My attorney," I said. "Why do you need an attorney?" "Because I am also a beneficiary." Linda smiled. Not a real smile, the kind that stops at the lips and goes no further. "Paige," she said, "the will is very simple. There is no need for drama." Harlan cleared his throat. He was a tall man with white hair and reading glasses resting at the end of his nose. He opened a folder on the table and said, "Before we begin reading the will, I need to explain the structure of Douglas Irving's estate." He said the word structure the way an architect might say foundation, carefully, deliberately, as if everything that came next depended on understanding that part first. Linda sat at the head of the table like she had already won. Harlan began reading the will slowly. He was the kind of attorney who believed legal documents should be heard, not skimmed. Every sentence landed with the weight of a closing argument. "To my wife, Linda Graves Irving, I leave the family residence located at 47 Birchwood Lane, free and clear of any lien or encumbrance. I also leave the remaining balance of our joint savings account." Linda nodded once. She pressed her hand flat against the table. Harlan continued. "To my stepdaughter, Cora Graves, I leave the sum of $20,000 from the education fund established in 2019. Cora blinked. $20,000. She looked at her mother. Linda's jaw tightened, but she held her expression in place. "That is the entirety of Douglas Irving's probate estate," Harlan said. The room went still. Arthur and Dean exchanged a quick look. Maggie did not move. Linda leaned forward. "The house and the savings," she said. "That is what I expected. However," Harlan continued, adjusting his glasses, "I am obligated to inform everyone present that the probate estate represents only a portion of the assets Douglas Irving accumulated during his lifetime." Linda's hand stopped moving on the table. "Over approximately 18 years, Harlan said, Douglas Irving completed a series of legal asset transfers. These transfers were made during his lifetime with full documentation, tax filings, and notarized records. The assets involved are not part of his probate estate and are therefore not distributed under this will." Linda's voice came out flat. "Transfers?" she asked. "To whom?" Harlan removed his glasses. Then he looked at me. The clock on the wall ticked 3 times before he answered. "To his daughter, Paige Irving." The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt crowded. The air was packed with things people wanted to say but could not quite form into words. Linda stood up. The legs of her chair scraped across the hardwood floor, sharp and sudden, cutting through the room like a match being struck. "What transfers?" she demanded. "I am his wife. I was his wife for 22 years. What are you talking about?" Harlan looked at her with the patient expression of a man who had delivered difficult news before and understood that the next few minutes mattered. "Perhaps Mr. Hale can provide the specifics," he said. Then he gestured toward Mitchell. Mitchell stood. He opened the brass clasps on his briefcase with 2 precise clicks that echoed in the silence. From inside, he removed 3 folders. Each one was tabbed, labeled, and arranged with the kind of precision only an attorney could make look effortless. He placed the first folder on the table. "This is the deed of ownership for a 6-story commercial building downtown," Mitchell said. "The property was originally purchased by Douglas Irving in 1999. Between 2008 and 2020, ownership was transferred in stages to Paige Irving through legally executed gift transfers. Each transfer was filed with the county recorder, accompanied by gift tax returns and notarized." He opened the second folder. "This is the summary statement for an investment portfolio held in Paige Irving's name since 2008. The portfolio includes index funds, dividend reinvestment accounts, and equity in 8 additional commercial properties across 3 states. Then he opened the third folder. "This is a consolidated asset valuation prepared by a certified public accountant, dated the week of Douglas Irving's passing." Mitchell rested one hand on the third folder and looked around the room. "The total value of assets held under the name Paige Irving as of that date is approximately $28 million. No one moved. Cora's mouth opened slightly. She pressed both hands flat against the table, as if the number had shifted the floor beneath her. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Dean removed his glasses and set them down. Maggie, who already knew, simply nodded once and folded her hands a little tighter. Linda did not sit down. She stood at the head of the table, gripping the edge so hard her knuckles turned pale against the dark wood. "No," she said. "No, that is not right. That was his money. She took it." Mitchell did not raise his voice. "Every transaction was completed voluntarily by Douglas Irving, with independent legal counsel, over a period of 18 years, he said. "These are not estate assets. They are the personal property of Paige Irving." Linda turned toward me. Her face had lost every bit of the composure she had worn since the funeral. She looked pale, stunned, and completely unprepared. "You knew," she said. "You sat in that house every Wednesday, ate my food, and you knew!" I looked back at her. "You told me to leave 4 hours after my father passed," I said. "You changed the locks that same night. And now you want to talk about what I knew?" The clock ticked. Nobody spoke. Mitchell was not finished. He reached into the briefcase one more time and removed a single sheet of paper. He placed it in the center of the table, face up, perfectly aligned with the edge. "There is one additional matter," he said. Linda was still standing. Her hands had not left the table. Cora had tears running down both cheeks, but she made no sound. "On the 9th day following Douglas Irving's passing," Mitchell continued, "a withdrawal of $80,000 was made from the joint savings account at First Regional Bank. The withdrawal was completed using a financial power of attorney signed by Douglas Irving in March of this year."
Harlan looked up from his folder. He already knew exactly where this was going.
"Under state law,"
Mitchell said,
"a power of attorney ends automatically upon the passing of the principal. Douglas Irving passed on October 11th. The withdrawal was made on October 20th. The document used to authorize that transaction was no longer valid."
Linda's voice came out tight. "I needed that money for the funeral." Mitchell slid the paper closer to her.
"The funeral expenses, according to the service provider, totaled $8,214, he said. The withdrawal was $80,000. That leaves $71,786 unaccounted for." The room fell into the kind of silence that happens when everyone starts doing the math at the same time. Arthur looked up at the ceiling. Dean looked down at his shoes. Maggie looked at Linda with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not anger. It was not pity. It was something closer to resignation, as if, until that exact moment, she had still been hoping she was wrong about who Linda really was. Harlan spoke next. His voice was careful and measured. Linda, I would advise you to speak with independent counsel before making any further statements about that transaction. Cora whispered, Mom. Just one word, but she said it like a request. Please stop. Please sit down. Please tell me this is not what it looks like. Linda did not sit down. She did not answer. She stood at the head of the table, both hands still gripping the edge, and for the first time in 22 years, Linda had nothing left to say. Somewhere below us, behind the wall of the dentist's office, a drill started up. The sound rose through the floor like a small alarm nobody could turn off. Then Linda sat down. Not gracefully. She dropped into the chair as if something inside her had finally given way. Her hands fell into her lap, and she stared at the table. 22 years, she said. Her voice was smaller now. The command had gone out of it. I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I drove him to every appointment. I sat in the hospital for 11 hours the night of his first major episode. I held his hand. No one answered. The clock kept ticking. I did not have a career, she continued. I did not have savings before him. My first husband left me with a leased car, a maxed-out credit card, and a daughter who was 18 months old. She looked around the room. Douglas knew that. He knew where I came from. He promised me I would never have to feel that helpless again. Then she looked at Harlan. Does none of that matter? Harlan chose his words carefully. The house is yours, he said. The savings, minus the disputed withdrawal, are part of the estate. Douglas did not leave you with nothing, Linda. He left me a house, she said, and he gave her $28 million. He gave her those assets while he was alive, Harlan replied. They were his to give. Maggie spoke for the first time. She had been sitting quietly, hands folded, watching the room the way she watched everything. Patiently, without commentary, waiting for the right moment. Douglas loved you, Linda, she said. He married you because he loved you. But he loved Paige too. And he knew, we both knew, that you would never share willingly. Linda looked at her. Maggie did not look away. So he made sure Paige was taken care of before it ever came to this. Linda stared at Maggie as if the words had hit harder than she expected. You knew? I knew because Douglas told me years ago, Maggie said. Her voice stayed even. He said, Linda will never let Paige have anything unless it is already done. He was not being cruel. He was being honest. Cora pulled her chair closer to her mother and placed one hand on Linda's arm. Linda did not react. I did not know, Linda whispered. I did not know any of this. And there it was, the truest sentence Linda had spoken in 22 years. She did not know because she had never asked. She did not know because she had never considered that the quiet girl who washed dishes and drove home every Wednesday might matter more than she assumed. The conference room clock struck the half hour. No one moved to leave. I stood up. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Linda, with her hands folded in her lap. Cora, with tears drying on her cheeks. Maggie, with her steady gaze. Arthur and Dean, with their slightly too short ties. Harlan, behind his folder. Mitchell, beside his briefcase. I did not come here to take anything from anyone, I said. Everything under my name has been mine for years. I came here so everyone in this room would know the truth. Not part of it. All of it. I looked at Linda. She did not look away. From today forward, I will not call, I will not visit, I will not explain. If you or Cora need to reach me, you can contact me through Mitchell. Then I picked up my bag from the floor beside my chair. I turned to Maggie. Thank you, Aunt Maggie. She nodded. She did not need anything more than that. We had always understood each other in the same quiet language my father used. A nod, a squeeze of the hand, a lifted palm. I walked toward the door. My shoes sounded against the hardwood in a steady rhythm, even, unhurried. I did not look back. At the threshold, I stopped. Then I turned, not all the way, just enough to see Linda's profile at the head of the table. You said the house is yours, I said. Then keep it. I do not need it. I never did. I closed the door behind me. Not with a slam, not with a gentle pull, just a firm close. The way my father had taught me to close a deal. Quiet, deliberate, final. In the hallway, the carpet was worn thin in front of the elevator. Mitchell fell into step beside me. He did not say anything. He knew some moments do not need commentary. The elevator was out of order, so we took the stairs. At the landing, Arthur and Dean caught up with us. Arthur held out his hand. Your father would have been proud of you, he said. I shook it. He would have told me to check the portfolio before driving home. Arthur almost laughed. Dean nodded. They walked to their car. I walked to mine. And the smell of cinnamon rolls from the bakery across the street followed me down the sidewalk, warm and ordinary and completely separate from everything that had just happened upstairs. That was fine. Ordinary was fine. I sat in the car for a long time. The parking lot behind the law office was nearly empty. Mitchell had left. Arthur and Dean had left. Inside the building, I imagined Linda and Cora were still in the conference room, still absorbing the truth, still trying to understand the new shape of their lives. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at the brick wall across the lot. A drain pipe ran down the side of the building, leaving a rust stain shaped almost like a question mark. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then I cried. Not for the money, not for Linda, not for the 22 years of 3 place settings, missing Christmas cards, and a yoga mat where my bed used to be. I cried for my father. Because he had known. He had known this day would come. The day Linda would change the locks. The day she would stand in the hallway and tell me to pack my bags. The day the will would be read and the numbers would speak for themselves. He had seen it years earlier. The same way he saw undervalued properties, the same way he saw market corrections before everyone else. And he had prepared for it in the only language he truly knew. Not with speeches, not with apologies, with numbers, with documents. With 18 years of quiet transfers, each one a small act of love disguised as paperwork. He could not stop Linda from being who she was. He loved her in his way, and he chose to stay with her. I understood that choice, even if I could not completely forgive it. But he had made sure that when the day finally came, and he knew it would, I would be standing on ground no one could take from me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. Then I started the car. On the way home, I drove past the building. My building. 6 stories of glass and brick, with a small brass plaque near the entrance that read, Irving Commercial. I had not changed the name. I did not plan to. I pulled over and sat with the engine idling, looking up at the 4th floor windows where the lights were still on. Some tenant was working late, completely unaware that the woman sitting in the car below owned the ceiling above their head. My father had been right. I was not caught off guard, but I would have traded every dollar in that portfolio just to hear him say, "Good job," one more time. 3 weeks after the reading, Linda hired a lawyer. His name was Brennan, and he specialized in estate disputes. He reviewed every document Mitchell had presented: the deeds, the tax filings, the notarized gift transfers, the portfolio statements. Then he called Linda back within a week. "There is no basis for a challenge," he told her. "The transfers were completed over 18 years by a competent adult with independent legal counsel. There is no evidence of pressure, manipulation, or reduced capacity." Douglas Irving knew exactly what he was doing, Linda argued. She said she had never been informed. Brennan explained that the law did not require a spouse to be informed of gifts made from individually owned assets. Douglas's separate property was his to give. The building had been purchased before the marriage. The investment fund had been established with separate funds. Every later contribution could be traced to his own earnings, not marital property. "Your husband was generous to you," Brennan told her. "He left you the family home, free and clear. He left you the savings. He did not leave you with nothing." "He left me with nothing compared to what he gave her," Linda said. Brennan did not answer that. The $80,000 was a separate matter. Mitchell sent a formal letter requesting the return of the $72,000 that exceeded the documented funeral costs. Linda's attorney advised her to comply. She did. The check arrived at Mitchell's office within 10 days, drawn from a personal account Linda had opened the day after the withdrawal. 3 days later, Cora sent me a text. It was the first direct message I had ever received from her. It said, "I did not know what she was going to do that night. I am sorry." I read it. Then I read it again. I did not answer. Not because I was angry, because I had no idea what to say to someone who had watched me walk down the stairs with a duffel bag in my hand and had not said a single word. After that, the family began to shift. Arthur called. Dean called. Neighbors who had been at the service reached out. The story Linda had spent years building, that Paige was absent, Paige did not care, Paige was too busy, fell apart under the weight of the numbers Mitchell had placed on that conference table. For the first time in 22 years, Linda found herself standing outside the family circle she had worked so hard to control. The distance she had created for me had finally found its way back to her. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone in your family treat you like you were invisible until they needed something from you, then you know exactly what this felt like. Not the money part, the other part. The part where they only notice you when it benefits them. If this story feels close to home, leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from someone who only cared about you on their own terms? And while you are here, please subscribe. It means more than you know. 6 months later, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a building overlooking a public park. It was not extravagant. The hardwood floors creaked near the bathroom door. The kitchen had enough counter space to cook a real meal. And the living room had 2 east-facing windows that let the morning light pour in warm and direct, landing right on the spot where I placed my desk. That spring, I opened my own consulting firm. I called it Irving Compliance Group. The name was not an accident. It was not sentimental either. My father would have hated anything too sentimental. It was a statement of origin. Everything I knew about numbers, patience, and reading a ledger the way some people read poetry had started with him. Maggie came over for dinner once a month. She always brought bread from the bakery near her house, and a bottle of wine she claimed was on sale, though it never actually was. We ate at the small table by the window and talked about Douglas. Not with sadness, with warmth. The kind of warmth that comes from remembering someone exactly as they were, without polishing the edges. He used to say you were the only person in the family who understood interest rates, Maggie told me one evening, as she cut a slice of sourdough. He used to say that about everyone he liked, I said. Maggie smiled. No, she said, just you. I kept one thing from the old house. Not the house itself, not the furniture, not the photographs Linda had arranged so carefully over the years. I kept the calculator. It sat on my desk beside my laptop, a 30-year-old pocket calculator with a cracked plastic case, yellowed buttons, and a display that flickered whenever you pressed the equal sign too hard. It was the same calculator my father had handed me the summer I was 16, in his office, with the desk lamp humming and the AM radio murmuring behind us. Linda never called. I did not expect her to. Cora sent one more letter, handwritten on stationery I did not recognize. She wrote about her job search, about the house feeling different now, about how she wished things had happened another way. I read it. Then I set it on the kitchen counter and left it there for a week. After that, I put it in a drawer. I was not ready to answer. And I had finally learned that not being ready does not mean not caring. One Tuesday morning, I was sitting at my desk when I picked up the calculator. It was heavier than it looked. The plastic was warm from the sunlight coming through the window, and the buttons had that soft resistance of something that had been pressed 10,000 times and expected to be pressed 10,000 more. The brand name on the bottom had worn away years ago. The battery compartment had a piece of tape holding it shut, the same piece my father had put there when I was 17, after the latch broke during one of our Saturday drives. I turned it on. The screen lit up with a faint gray-green glow. The numbers were slightly uneven. The decimal point was brighter than the digits. It still worked. Of course it still worked. My father never bought things that stopped working. I typed in the number. 28000000. 28 million. I looked at it for a long time. The screen held the number without judgment, without commentary, without applause. It was just math. The same way it had always been just math. On those Saturday drives, in his office under the humming desk lamp, during our quarterly calls, in the motel room at 3 o'clock in the morning. My father had once said it while we sat in his truck outside a colonial with a cracked driveway. Money does not fix everything, he told me, but knowing how to count it means you will never be caught off guard. He was right. I was never caught off guard. Not by Linda, not by the locks, not by the 3 chairs, not by any of it. But I would have traded every dollar on that screen just to hear him say it one more time. I turned the calculator off. The screen went dark. Then I set it back on the desk beside my laptop, where it had been every day since I moved in. I picked up my coffee, opened my email, and started the day. Outside, the park was slowly filling with joggers, dog walkers, and a woman pushing a stroller through the fallen leaves. The sun still poured through the east-facing window. The floor creaked near the bathroom door. The bread Maggie had brought on Sunday was still on the counter, wrapped in a cloth napkin. There was enough left for toast. This was my life. I had built it, and it was enough. My name is Paige Irving, and that is my story. My father did not simply leave me money. He left me the one thing money cannot buy: the ability to live without waiting for anyone's permission to exist. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There are more stories like mine in the description below. I will see you in the next one.